It's my privilege to have the opportunity to introduce, as the chair of this panel, someone who's been a partner of mine for 25, almost 30 years in this work. And while I was away, put this whole symposium together. Paul Camacho, many of you know, in many, many capacities. He's someone who is really 24 hours a day working for veterans and feels it deeply in his heart, and has given his life for what other people's needs. And I don't think we say thank you enough to people like him and like people in this panel. So I hope that you'll join me in thanking them with a round of applause.
I'm really a sociologist and kind of a back office person. This panel is really the first to talk about the needs of Guards and Reserves and programs that are going to have to come in to support the Guards and Reserves. And so the members of this panel are Congressman Lynch, who's also already been introduced to you, Tom Lyons, who you've already been introduced to, and showing Major Winfield Danielson is going to present this slideshow, so I'm going to turn this over to him, and somebody's going to coordinate the slides. He's a full-time public affairs officer for the Massachusetts National Guard, and previously he was a traditional Guard member working full-time civilian positions, including public affairs director for Audio Adventures and marketing and e-commerce manager for EchoStar. So, second, we have Paul Desmond. He served in Vietnam as a LERP with the 173rd Airborne Brigade in 1968. And he's currently the agency director for USDOL Veterans Employment and Training Service. He was a service officer for the Order of the Purple Heart, and he was my service officer for my disability when I came back for the Purple Heart. And Boston school teacher for over 10 years. So we have another thing in common that I didn't realize. He serves on the Duxbury School Committee currently. And finally, of course, we have Thomas G. Kelly, was a Boston College High School graduate, a College of the Holy Cross, and he was the Naval Officer Candidate School in 1960, and of course it was the recipient of the Congressional Medal of Honor for heroism in Vietnam. He was appointed the Commissioner of Veterans Affairs in 1999, and he became the state's first Secretary of Veterans Affairs in 2003, and he lives in South Boston. So this is our local touch, which we've wanted to put forth. At the end of this panel, we just keep moving through the panels. You're welcome to, as you want to, go get a lunch out there and come back. So I'd like to have the panel be seated and turn things over to Major Danielson. And I'm going to keep a clock on everyone. That's the chore.
I'd like to start. I think you'll find in the current conflict, a majority of the veterans that are going to come back to Massachusetts are going to be members of the Guard and Reserve. And I think you can see a microcosm of that. If you look in your packets, there's a small list of student veterans who are going to be talking later in a panel this afternoon. And you'll see that 5 out of 6 of those are members of the Guard and Reserve. So in going into this panel talking about veterans benefits, I think it's important to talk about the Guard because I think a lot of people don't understand what the Guard is. So I'm going to give you a brief introduction to the Guard, and I think it'll be helpful for the panel discussion we're going to have. Since the end of the Cold War, the National Guard has played an increasingly large role as part of our total national defense package. Where Guardsmen were once seen as hobbyists, today they are an integral part of the nation's defense. I think as a Guard member today, it's no longer a matter of if you'll be mobilized for service, but when. My name is Major Winfield Danielson. I'm the Public Affairs Officer for the Massachusetts National Guard. I've been in the National Guard since 1987, and I've served in 3 states' National Guard. Slide, please. In 1636, Members of the Massachusetts Bay Colony joined together to form a militia in order to protect their community. These citizen soldiers set aside their livelihood, families, and personal interests so their communities could live in security, much as their descendants in the Massachusetts National Guard do today. Slide. Among the military services, the Guard is unique in that it has a dual mission and a dual chain of command, both to act as a federal reserve and to support the state during local emergency. To support this dual mission, we have a dual chain of command. Just like the active component, the National Guard is ultimately commanded by the President of the United States. But each state's National Guard is also commanded by the state's governor, who can call up National Guard members to provide for public safety support or in response to local emergency or natural disaster. Slide. I've heard a lot of commentators in the media, both sides of the media, talk about how the Guard deployments in support of the Operations Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom are unprecedented. The fact is that National Guard soldiers and airmen participated in every major conflict in this nation's history. The numbers you see on the slide are the numbers for Massachusetts National Guard. Specifically, I'm going to go over the national numbers with you while you look at the slide. Nationwide, 164,000 Guard members fought in the Revolutionary War. Over 1,900,000 in the Civil War, 380,000 in World War I, 300,000 in World War II. In all of these conflicts, Guard members played a major role and deployed for the duration of the conflict in most cases. At the beginning of the Cold War, the United States maintained a larger active military, which it relied on to fight wars and deter Soviet aggression. Now, this relegated the Guard to more of a secondary role. The majority of the 138,000 Guard members who were mobilized during the Korean War and the 23,000 who were mobilized during the Vietnam War served at home in homeland defense type of missions or backfilling active component forces that went overseas. But as the Cold War drew to a close and the U.S. drew down the size of its active component force, the National Guard again found itself playing a central role as part of the total national defense package. Over 75,000 Guard soldiers and airmen served during the first Gulf War, and the vast majority of those served overseas. Today, over 80,000 National Guard soldiers and airmen are on active duty, the majority serving in Iraq and Afghanistan. Once again, the Guard is a major contributor to our nation's defense, serving alongside active and reserve forces. Slide. We talked about serving at home and the state mission of the National Guard. These are just some examples of missions performed by the Massachusetts National Guard in support of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Most recently, the Democratic National Convention, of course, in July, we assisted with public safety support there, as well as the blizzard of 2005 a few months ago. We had soldiers and airmen serving to protect public safety then as well. Slide. Some general facts about the Massachusetts National Guard. We've got about 8,200 soldiers and airmen. They are Air Force and Army combat units and combat support units. We have an annual budget of about, for this past fiscal year 2004, was about $283 million. 95% of that was federally funded. As a matter of fact, if you take the federal salaries of the Guardsmen and you take the state income taxes generated that, it actually covers the amount of money that the state pays for the National Guard. So I would argue that Massachusetts gets a good deal of bang for its buck out of the National Guard. Slide. We've all heard 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. Obviously, if you're deployed, that's not the case. But I want to say, even for the soldiers and airmen that are not deployed, that are serving at home, that's the minimum. They go through the same basic training and professional development schools that our active component brothers and sisters go through. So that's a lot of additional time. Also, the people in leadership positions spend a lot of their personal time in meetings, developing training plans, you name it. So it's not a hobby. In a lot of ways, it's a second career. And it's, again, that 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year, even when you're not deployed, it's a minimum. Many people spend much more time in the Guard. Slide. You can read the slide for yourself, but I want you to note one thing. The individual mobilizations, the 9,500 that have served on active duty since September 11th in the Massachusetts National Guard, if you recall the previous slide, that's actually more than the 8,200 we have in the Massachusetts National Guard. And the reason for that is there have been a number of people in the Massachusetts National Guard who have served on more than one mission, whether it's at home or abroad or perhaps going to Iraq and then Afghanistan. There are people that have been mobilized twice and sometimes even 3 times. And we count those each as an individual mobilization, so that's why the number is higher. But you can see it's a significant portion of people that we've had that have served at home and abroad since September 11th. Slide. In case of domestic emergency, these are some of the assets that the Massachusetts National Guard can bring to the table. I'll give you a few moments to read that. Slide. There's a quote here from General Blum. You can read that as I talk. But the point here is that the nature of warfare has changed. We entered the global war on terrorism with a force structure that was designed to fight, on the Guard side, another World War II, but definitely a Cold War era type of conflict. The asymmetric conflict that we're in now, we weren't designed for that. The National Guard Bureau, looking forward, realizes that and realizes we have to transform. And we have to transform to make sure that we're ready, reliable, and relevant, not only to this conflict, but the conflicts of the future. And it's a challenge because we're in the middle of a war, so it's like changing a tire while you're driving down the road. But it's something that has to be done. Slide. The goals of the transformation, they're simple. We need to provide sufficient capabilities under state control to respond to local crises, ensure a mix of the appropriate type of units to support the federal Department of Defense overseas, and we also have to try to provide a more predictable model for overseas rotation and operational rotations of National Guard members. Slide. In order to provide sufficient capabilities for the governors to respond to local crises, each state is going to need certain military assets. You'll see in the slide they're listed the things that we think are critical to a state in an emergency. The plan is that each state would have these core units available to them, and that approximately 75% of Guard members will be available to respond in case of local emergency in the state. Now, if a given state has one of these critical units that are deployed, the states have signed cooperative agreements so that if one state's medical units are deployed, another state's medical units would backfill in an emergency. All the states except California have signed that cooperative agreement. Slide. Growth areas. We talked about how the nature of warfare has changed. In addition to the core support units we mentioned earlier, there are certain high-demand units today that are in short supply in both the active component and the reserves, and we need more of these. And you can see them here, particularly military police. The plan is to bring in more of these types of units in favor of units that we don't need as much, field artillery. I don't know if you've been following the news, but there are a number of field artillery units that have been retrained as military police and then sent to perform military police type of missions. The reason for this, in a Cold War, World War II style conflict, artillery is very important because they're dealing with massed formations of tank and mechanized infantry. That's not the nature of the conflict we're in right now. In a guerrilla, asymmetric warfare type situation, artillery isn't as important. You need more military police to secure routes and escort convoys. So we need to phase in more of these high-demand growth area type of units. Slide. Arguably, the most important will be creating a more predictable model for operational rotation of National Guard members. It's hard both on families and civilian employers when they can't plan ahead and deployments that were supposed to last a year are extended to 18 months or 24 months and no one expected it. The result is frustration and a drag on the soldiers' morale. The National Guard Bureau has proposed a model in response to this problem that would provide for more predictable deployments. You can see the model up there, but basically the upshot is that Army National Guard soldiers would be expected to do a 12 or 18-month deployment out of every 6 years. So over a 20-year career, they may deploy approximately 3 times. Slide. A little different on the Air Guard side. The Air Guard units typically, their rotations are much shorter than the Army Guard units. So the Air Guard model is that an Air National Guard airman would be expected to deploy for up to 3 months out of every 15 months. Slide, please. So that concludes the introduction. Over the past few minutes, we've discussed the history of the National Guard, a little bit about its organization, a little about where we're going. Again, I think understanding that is helpful when I think a lot of the veterans from the current conflict from Massachusetts particularly are going to be Guardsmen and reservists. I hope you've gained a better understanding about the Guard, because we can't defend the community unless the community understands and supports us. And that concludes my introduction.
I forgot to mention the order. We should go from Paul to the Secretary, to Tom, so we can conclude.
Well, the Congressman may have to get this.
Did you?
Yeah. No. Go ahead.
Well, we'll go this way. Quick. Paul.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I just want to take a couple of minutes to, first of all, I want to recognize the Gold Star mothers, as well as our distinguished guest, Tom Kelly, and of course, the Congressman. I am the Agency Director for Veterans Employment and Training, and I've been in veterans work since 1980. I was a service officer with Purple Heart USA. I ran the office in the JFK building, and Paul Camacho was a customer. Hopefully he was satisfied at that time. Tried to take care of the disability cases. I got out, did that for about 10 years and was recruited by the U.S. Department of Labor and came in as a work strictly uniformed services cases. I want to tell you what we do and how we're involved with the Guard and Reserve and how we are involved generally with the veterans community. First of all, Veterans Employment and Training is a sub-entity of DOL. There's only 225 of us in the entire country. So next to the Veterans Administration, we are clearly dwarfed. Our budget is primarily directed at service delivery type programs. We've got a number of initiatives right now that really stand out, and they're very relevant to what's going on in terms of the Guard and Reserve. First of all, for us to try to prioritize what we do, we always realize that we're dealing with veterans and eligibles. Therefore, time management is really not a word that you can apply in our agency. We run two enforcement programs right out of the chute. One is the Uniformed Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act. That is the federal law under Title 38 that protects those that are absented from military duty. So when the equations go sour or technical assistance is needed by an employer or whatever, our agency goes in and conducts an investigation. We handle the case, and our authority goes up to and including preparing the referrals to the Department of Justice for prosecution if, in fact, we cannot settle the case. I want to tell you, and I'm proud to tell you, that in the 13 years that I've been in Veterans Employment and Training, I have only had 2 cases that have had to go to litigation out of all the cases that I handled. I came in the Gulf War, and I personally handled about 130 cases myself that particular year. Currently, our caseload's pretty well under control. I have 2 assistant directors in my office, and also I want to direct your attention to the table behind the projector. There are some red folders there, and it has the potpourri of what we have for our programs. Secondly, we handle veterans preference cases for all individuals that are, if you, for example, if you are a veteran and you've applied to a federal agency and you feel you got the bum's rush or you weren't placed on the certification list, we're going to investigate the case, and if we feel that there was a we do not adjudicate the case per se, but if we believe there's a determination that there was merit and there was a prohibited personnel practice or there was protocols that weren't followed, then we give you your rights to go before the Merit Systems Protection Board, the MSPB, and an administrative law judge or a LLJ will decide whether or not they want to take jurisdiction on your case. Our most recent program, we found there's clearly a need to deal with individuals that are incarcerated. And we have a homeless veterans reintegration project that we now call IVTP, Incarcerated Veterans Transition Program. The only criteria is that you be a veteran. That means you have served in the military. There's no benchmark that you have to reach in terms of eligible days. And from that point, you need to be within 18 months of completing your period of incarceration. We take a look at how to transition you, who you want to link up with, work directly with, and this is while you're incarcerated physically, working with the prison social work services, with the probation people, and the transition teams in general. We have homeless veterans reintegration projects. And by the way, we have one of those IVTP programs running at the Veterans Benefits Clearinghouse in Roxbury, and they're up for a second-year option for $200,000. We have a Veterans Workforce Investment Program. It's part of the WIA, the Workforce Investment Act, and the focus is primarily training. Now, eligible Guard and Reserve, when they reach veteran status, if they were clearly in a conflict, they become eligible participants, or once they reach veteran status. Now, we currently have 3 of those grants, and the reason why that's an important number is because our agency, Vets, ran a nationwide competition. We published this in the Federal Register. We put a solicitation on the street. We had 170 applicants, colleges, nonprofits, state workforce agencies, workforce investment boards. Now, out of the 17 grants that were awarded nationwide, 3 of them ended up in Massachusetts. One of them is at Tom Kelly's shop, which is an outcomes-based grant. It's not dealing with employment, but rather building an infrastructure or a network so that that referral network will be in place for all veterans, and certainly with a specific design on the individual veterans that are coming back. And they run a program called Voice that we're proud to be associated with. They say the rubber meets the road when you put money on the street. Well, we give the State Workforce Agency $3.6 million to run our Jobs for Veterans Act. There's 32 offices right now, 32 one-stops in Massachusetts. Some of them are privatized. Some of them are collaborative models that are run by the Division of Career Services. In 18 of those offices, because there's a formula, and I'll tell you a little bit about that formula, we have VETS reps. They're called Disabled Veterans Outreach Persons, or local veterans employment reps. Their job is just to be like a fireman, so to speak. They sit there and they wait for the fire. They are clearly dedicated personnel. They're segregated from dealing with the general population, and their only job is to deal with veterans and eligibles. And 18 of the offices currently have those staff, but again, those staff are willing to travel and make themselves available to a geographic place where any returnee, if they need employment services, can come to. So that's $3.6 million on that program. I could go on and on and on. Just one other thing I want to let you know, that we do military transition. We conduct mobilization and demobilization briefings for the Guard and Reserve. We're at the point when they leave. We're at the point when they come back. Clearly, one of the staple programs is the USERRA program. I mean, their reemployment rights are paramount to their continuum and transition back into civilian life. So if anybody has any, I'll be out back afterwards if you want to speak to me personally, and I don't want to take time from the rest of the panel, but I'd like you to take a red folder if you could. Thank you.
For the sake of time and getting ourselves all back on schedule, we want to open it up to any questions you have for any of the panelists. So if anybody has a question for anybody, including Tom Kelly or Tom or the Congressman, please speak up. Yes.
My name is Sharon Johnson, and next week, or not the week after, we're going to be going down to Washington, D.C. as part of the CEO. And I was wondering, while Stephen Lynch is here as a captive participant, could we meet with you to discuss the president's, he wants to cut the whole TRIO program, which veterans are not as part of. So what we were planning to do is strategize and to meet with our congressional leaders to see if, we can, whatever we can do to keep these programs alive.
Great, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The number to call is, you want to jot this down. This is my Boston office, and they'll patch you through to D.C. so you don't have to get charged for a long-distance call. It's 617-428-2000. And there are 2 people in my office in Boston that handle Veterans Affairs. One is Bob Folks, and he's here right now. And the other is Dan Lynch, no relation, but he handled a lot of veteran stuff as well in my office. And we can work it out so that we can meet down in D.C. and I can pass the word, or you can communicate directly to the other members of Congress. You've got a good group. I mean, we all row in the same direction. The 10 members of the delegation, with respect to veterans. There's no difference at all in our positions. We are in lockstep, as well as, obviously Senator Kennedy and Senator Kerry have been terrific as well on veterans' health issues. So, but there is need for change, and the President's proposal is for drastic cuts. Fortunately, I think we have enough Democrats and enough moderate Republicans who will help us change that number to increase the funding for veterans' health and veterans programs. So, I think we're in the fight. We're in the fight, and I think we'll have to, force the President to use his veto, publicly against veterans, or to allow our initiatives to pass. So, but we've got a real struggle. We've got a struggle. He says he's flat funding it, but when you're in the middle of a war, and you've got all these new veterans coming back that need services, and a lot of these amputees and a lot of these veterans who are coming back, major head injuries, long-term. These are young men and women. They are going to be with us, God willing, for 60 years of health care and service and therapy and helping them with programs. So, we've got to put the money up here to take care of them. If we have money for these tax cuts for the rich and sending people to Mars, then we ought to have money to take care of our veterans. So, but the louder we make that call, the better off we are. And we certainly welcome your involvement and your participation. We'll work with you. And Greta Hebert in my office in Washington could probably give you a good sense of the schedule. You do not want to get down to D.C. when everyone else is home, and that happens. People come down and there's no session and there are no members of Congress in D.C. So we've got to try to schedule your visit during a busy time in Washington so that, in a matter of a day you can probably see all 10 members of Congress and the 2 senators. So, or at least a matter of a couple of days, So we'll just have to pay attention to the schedule down there, and Greta will be great at that. She'll help you out. Thanks.
Congressman, one last question, please. Education question. The GI Bill for reservists under Chapter 1606 was created back in '85 for recruiting and retention with a 6-year commitment. And this 6 years has worked out well. We've had several students that have been activated and have gone to Afghanistan and Iraq during this period of 6 years. Some, I have a total of 5, that have returned from their commitment overseas, and that 6 years have expired. But anywhere between 12 months to 15 months, my record shows that these students lost during the 6 year period. Now they're coming back, and they're getting out of the military. So they gave up 15 to 18 months. Are we doing anything to give them those 18 months so that they can receive their benefits?
Actually, I sponsored a bill probably 2 weeks ago. It's a strange situation, but what we're doing is for those young people who are willing to serve their country, we're penalizing them. We're penalizing them for that service, which is what you're describing. In some cases, students they get a scholarship or a grant, and because they answer the call for their country, they lose their scholarship, they lose their grant, they lose time under the program. So what we're trying to do is to correct that. It was an oversight because I think originally when people were thinking about National Guard and Reservists, they were not thinking about extended tours of duties for those personnel and families and foreign service. More specifically. So we've got to straighten that situation out. I have a bill already. It's filed. It's in the can. I don't know if it has a number yet, but we just filed it recently to rectify that situation, because we're seeing it over and over again now that we have people returning and they're finding that their grants were not extended. Some universities are. Some universities are taking it upon themselves, but it's sort of a voluntary or a discretionary ruling. And really, we should have a uniform rule, and I think there's a good public policy argument, a strong policy argument for granting full benefits for all those people who might have deferred grants or program eligibility or scholarships in lieu of their service in the military. So we've got that going, and we've got pretty strong support behind it. We just got to push it through. But it's a great question. Thank you.
Yes, my question is for Secretary Kelly. First, I'd like to thank you for your sacrifice and your duty, and just your amazing contribution through your service. My question, actually, it's an equal opportunity question. It applies with reference maybe to the whole board, specifically for Secretary Kelly, and that is, we talked a little bit about USARA. We talked about the Army National Guard. We talked about the number of service members who have been deployed, and I would suspect that number would be exponentially increased with the reserve forces of all nature within this Commonwealth. And many of them are business owners. And my question is, we have in place things that will guarantee that a service member's family is taken care of should they become deployed. It's called a dependent care packet. I was wondering if you'd like to see and how we would go about funding such a packet or such a program that would ensure that a Guard member or a reservist or an Air National Guard member who gets deployed, how their business gets to be maintained while they are deployed. We talked about how long they're gone for, how many times they're deployed. Some of these small business owners are devastated when they return and have a difficult time keeping their businesses running. In some cases, aren't able to keep them running at all.
Well, it's a great question, and unfortunately there's nothing that I'm aware of on the state level or even the federal level to take care of small businesses like that. As you know, we do have laws in place here in the Commonwealth which makes up the difference in pay for public employees who are activated in the Guard and Reserve. But for and we have a new Anti-Discrimination Commission set up, signed into law about 6 months ago, which would protect members of the Guard and Reserve as well as veterans from discrimination in the workplace in the private sector. The only thing that would apply to veterans-owned small businesses was a law which was passed a couple of years ago, which would set aside a certain percentage, I think it was 5%, for projects under the control of DCAM, which is the state construction agency. And before that could ever get off the ground, unfortunately, a construction reform package was put together with the help of the governor and the legislature. Building trades, unions, everybody was on the same sheet of music, and they passed this construction reform package a year or so ago. And unfortunately, lost in the fine print was the fact that the earlier law was revoked by this new one. So there is nothing in place now which, in the state level, which protects veterans-owned small businesses. I concur with you 100%, Mr. Chelly, that something has to be done.
Not to belabor a point, but the opportunity to address it in August body was one I couldn't pass up. This is specifically addressed towards Secretary Kelly and Paul Desmond, and it's regarding veterans preference again. I worked for a time as a vocational rehabilitation counselor and counseling psychologist with the Department of Veteran Affairs, Folk Rehab. I am now the regional rehabilitation specialist for the Department of Labor. And through networks that I've become part of over time, I'm getting an increasing number of calls from people that are veterans and disabled veterans seeking employment under civil service, and finding that while they're being given preference on the list, that they're being bypassed, both at the federal level and at the state and local level. Particularly, Tommy alluded earlier to guys coming back, and we working class guys that come back, we're looking for preference in terms of going on to police departments and fire departments, and finding now that those jobs aren't as readily available as they might have been. Tommy, in our town, we've got the fire chief bypassing disabled veterans and veterans to hire non-veterans, and it's a great concern. I'm wondering, is there anything that the state has that can guarantee some type of preference that kind of guarees that disabled veterans and veterans who are qualified will not be bypassed. And the second part of the question is, Paul, I see within our own agency, directors hiring non-veterans for positions that there are qualified disabled veterans for, and wondering how can we go out and say that we're going to support these things when we don't even do it within our own agencies.
I think what you're saying that there's an enforcement problem, that the laws are on the books. There's no doubt in anybody's mind that a disabled veteran gets absolute preference in hiring. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I know Paul has been helpful to my agency on a couple of occasions on enforcing that on, let's say, the county level here in Massachusetts, which is kind of a confusing system. Whether they have to abide by the law and stuff, that's another issue. But it could be that this anti-discrimination commission, which has been set up and is going to be holding public hearings across the Commonwealth, is a good forum to bring these things up. And there's I can give you the names. It's a fellow named Jake Comer from Quincy, Bob Cahalane from Northampton, Robert Stevens from Cambridge, and a couple of others who are involved in this, and they'll be holding public hearings to address those issues.
Okay, first of all, I want to go back to the issue of the state employment. You know, the federal law, the Uniform Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act, has a discrimination section in it. And what happens is that even though from an enforcement perspective, our interests are clearly not to try to put ourselves in a domain over the state civil service hiring system, there will be the haves and the have-nots. And therefore, if there's perceived discrimination, we've had it happen with police departments, we would conduct an investigation with respect to the civil service system. Now, a couple of years ago, we got together with John Mara, who was the Deputy Counsel for the Department of Personnel Administration, Omar Hernandez, rather. He's now a judge in Massachusetts, who was Deputy Counsel to John Mara at the Department of Personnel Administration. They took it upon themselves, with our help, to take a look at the USERA law, and they wrote a 100-page plus handbook on how the civil service system in Massachusetts is supposed to work. If you read the Secretary of State's handbook, one of the ironic lines in it is that Massachusetts is a state of absolute veterans preference. But then it continues on to say that means the individual goes to the top of the list, but not necessarily guaranteeing that they get hired. Plus, we have a diminished point system in the sense that it's very complex. You could be on a list before you leave. That list could expire while you're gone. If you have a 6-month window when you come back to get back on the list, you can migrate your score. I could go on and on. Let's move to the federal side, where you indicated that we have problems within the federal government. Secretary Chow, Department of Labor, DOL is and should be the model agency along with every federal agency with respect to hiring. Sometimes the government can be the greatest discriminator of its own laws and circumstances. What happens is, quite frankly, if I'm the hiring authority and I want to, and this is a pro-veteran issue, if I want to hire in a special hiring authority and do not wish to advertise the position in federal government, I can go and I can snatch myself a special disabled veteran, 30% or greater, and hire them non-competitively. The question at issue is, what does that do to everybody else? And the answer is, everybody else becomes a have-not because they are not a special disabled veteran in that circumstances. We investigate the prohibitive personnel practices. If you came to me or my agency and said, I believe I got a bad deal when I applied for federal employment, we get the certification lists. We get everything and anything that's related to your application. We compare apples to oranges. We find out who else applied for the job, what their educational background was. We've all taken courses from the Office of Personnel Management. I've taken an EEO discrimination investigators course out in California that accredits me with EEO to be a contract investigator. I understand discrimination. We look at it, we make a determination, but we're only a clearinghouse. I said we don't adjudicate those cases. We then decide whether or not you should be in a position to be either we're aggrieved or you're aggrieved in the situation, and then we give you your rights to MSPB, Merit Systems Protection Board, at which time the judge has to get up on the right side of the bed that morning and say, I want to take jurisdiction on that case. That's how the system works. So we are there to ensure that everything's put in perspective so you can figure out what happened and why it happened. So I rest my case on that issue.
I'd like to throw in one other thing that recently the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate here in Massachusetts have formed for the very first time a joint committee on veterans and federal affairs, which sends a strong signal, I think, to every veteran that their voices are going to be heard, and we're lucky to have one of the members, Mike Rush from West Roxbury, here in the audience. So I believe that instances of the system not working properly, this is something that committee probably is the right forum to bring your concerns to.
I'll ask one last question. It's not as much a question as a sort of a statement, I guess, is seeing the younger veterans coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. I remember the circumstances of coming back from Vietnam. And one of the things that the state did is that it put in place a tuition waiver so that I could go to UMass Boston free, basically. And I could work at UPS and I could get my $130 a month on the GI Bill. But now when veterans come back, they do get their tuition free, but they pay fees, which the university doesn't waive. And if we're really talking about recognizing veteran service and recognizing people who have been out there facing the bullets, I think it's time that some pressure be brought to bear. I'm not sure exactly where to remove those fees. Unfortunately, because that's how the universities feed themselves, it's against the university's interest to waive the fees. If there's a way, a fund through the state or whatever could be set up to reimburse those universities for the fees. So there's a real incentive for vets to come. They come, they wait for their checks, they have to pay those fees, they don't have the money up front, they disappear. The sad fact is there are less veterans coming back to school after this war than probably any other war. And there are a lot of disincentives involved, and this is one I think that we really need to do everything we can to remove. So I don't know whether it means getting a letter from the delegation, moving the governor, moving the legislature, or the board of trustees, but I think this is something that we really need to move on pretty quickly because we have more and more coming back, and we're going to see the disabled vets coming back probably in the summer. And we want to be able to help them. So anyway, I want to thank the panel and especially the congressman, everybody here today. And we are going to move on, but I'm going to give you a Ron. You want to ask a question before? I believe all rules are made to be broken, but I also want to let everybody have a chance to get something to eat. So last question.
My name is Ron Harris. I firstly, to all veterans that served, God bless you and welcome home. I'm a Vietnam era vet, and I'm currently a student here at UMass. And I went through the Upward Bound program last spring semester, and I want to speak on what that program did for me. I went to Southeast Asia in '73 and came back with issues. And for the last 3 decades, I've struggled with drug and alcohol dependency. I think partially because of my service. And I didn't think I was worth or deserving of anything. And a recruiter from the Upward Bound program, Mary Beth O'Sullivan, came to the homeless shelter for veterans on Court Street and talked me into attempting to see what I had left. As a result of that, I am back full-time student at this university, and it is the most incredible experience I've had in the last 20 years of my life. And I think it's a travesty that the present administration is saying anything about what this program is not doing for the people that have served this country. And I just want to stand up now and say that I am forever grateful to the Upward Bound program, because it showed me that I am a human being that deserves a chance, that I have potential, and that I can do something with my life. And I hope this symposium will do something to further that position. Thank you.